Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, last year's top grossing film, was seen by 1 in 5 of our population in cinemas alone. Furthermore, ticket sales overseas multiplied its UK box office tenfold. There's every reason to assume that the Leavesden Studio Tour, launched next weekend, will be similarly successful. And it's heartening to see the young Harry Potter audience moving with Daniel Radcliffe into other genres. Witness the extraordinary impact of The Woman in Black, which opened last month after a huge world premiere here in London. Incidentally, I for one should be very happy to see Leicester Square emerge from its redevelopment as a global hub for film premieres. There's nowhere quite like it, and at long last it seems we'll have it back and fully operational by the end of May. What's certain is that people continue to love the movies. According to BFI analysis, taking all forms of consumption into account, there were 81 film viewings per person last year, which works out at almost 7 films per person per month. Unsurprisingly, most of them are watched on television, but that remains a statistic that I think is very well worth savouring. I'll say it again, people love movies, and the industry behind the scenes continues to be sophisticated, dynamic, and highly aspirational. Yet paradoxically, however much people love the movies, they really don't appear to have that much regard for this thing called copyright. Let me take a moment to explore that, what seems to me, an apparent contradiction. As Charles Dickens would understand only too well, films simply couldn't get made in anything like their present quantity and quality without a robust system of copyright. Yes, there'd still be passionate filmmakers and no doubt the behemoth that is YouTube, but there'd be no adequately managed commercial route to the marketplace. With DVD sales, especially of catalogue titles, declining, and online platforms as yet to yield better than relatively low returns, the value chain is under increasingly severe strain. Over the last year or so, the sweep of consolidations and restructurings at distribution companies has been almost relentless. The clarion calls to mitigate risk have never sounded more urgent. Right across the film industry and in other areas too, business models have been altered irrevocably by this thing called digital. Advertising spend continues to migrate online, and the rising tide of online content, with every brand, let alone every movie, having its own website, is becoming utterly mountainous. The expression of an idea may take physical or intellectual form, and it can result in assets with serious financial and cultural value, which in turn could be sold, rented, licensed, or even given away. But the rise of the internet during these past 2 decades has been accompanied by a set of cultural and societal shifts, the fundamental implications of which most of us are still really struggling to fully comprehend. I'm not just talking about the incessant scourge of piracy, serious as that can be, with infringers profiting at a cost of entry that's all but zero. That said, it was satisfying that the High Court found against Pirate Bay website last month. It was a ruling under the Copyright Designs and Patents Act. Not unreasonably, Section 97A states that ISPs, with actual knowledge of their service being used to infringe copyright, can be obliged to restrict access to the infringing website for their customers in the UK, irrespective of where in the world the infringing website is located. Now, whether or not it's justified, opposition to film piracy is frequently perceived as part of a rigid corporate agenda. I read a trade press article last month in which the head of planning at a London advertising agency observed there's a natural suspicion of corporate propaganda prevalent in the UK, where we tend to be sceptical of the motivations of brands, and anything that whiffs of short-termism or opportunism is on very shaky ground. The early 21st century is a new electronic age of social democracy, more specifically, social media democracy. 90% of us make purchases on the recommendation of other people, and 10% tend to influence the other 90%. We in the movie industry have always understood that the power of key influencers, followed by positive word of mouth, is the driving force behind every really successful release. Online networks now play a similarly important role commercially and socially in our marketplace. Websites like Netflix have powerful algorithms that spur discovery of new choices, and in an environment in which there are far more ways to buy and watch movies than have ever been possible before. Individuals feel more connected and better able to share content instantly. The industry can start the process of building awareness much earlier with things like video blogs from the set. Unfortunately, A byproduct of this activity is to give advance notice to criminal networks of the imminent demand for a hot property. Internet users can claim that they themselves have contributed directly to the profile and the value of a film by liking and recommending it. To an extent, some may even have come to feel like co-creators, and in that respect, Web 2.0 has provided all the interactive tools you could possibly ask for. Now that's a seismic shift from the days of the so-called passive consumer. Ever since this particular genie escaped from the bottle, anything that denies access runs the risk of looking oppressive, self-interested, or simply out of touch, giving the impression of being very 20th century in a world that's rapidly moved on. Paying customers increasingly resent being told when and how they can watch a finished film. All too often, film industry messages feel as though they're being delivered in the wrong kind of voice at the wrong time. Look at the damaging mess that were SOPA and PIPA in the US just a few weeks ago. That's the Stop Online Piracy and Protect IP Acts. Both, in my judgment, were farcical failures. This was 20th century thinking, not just defeated, but routed by the 21st century. The underlying intention of both bills was unarguable, although as someone whose day job is wrestling with legislative complexity, I'd suggest that our overall priority remains enforcing existing copyright laws rather than attempting to construct new ones. Anyway, the film industry and its lobbyists were outthought and outflanked by powerful online companies and their lobbyists, who quite brilliantly whipped up a global storm of outrage about creators selfishly wishing to safeguard their jobs. Quite how the removal of blatantly infringing content from the web is seen to be threatening to valid forms of freedom of expression still continues to escape me, but the web blackout on the 18th of January portrayed the film industry as the enemies rather than the entertainers of the people. I still find it positively weird. And yet what we're left with is a wretched state of affairs which common sense tells me cannot possibly be sustainable. With supreme irony, one corporate agenda in the US managed to trounce another. And as ever, they use the rights of the little guy as the weapon of choice. Our agenda, the film industry's agenda, was and is seen as smug, restrictive, and somehow denying in the digital age, rather than going with the grain of a modern community that wants to collaborate and share stuff. Ultimately, to my mind, a greater democratization of culture and storytelling can only be a good thing for the film industry and for its future development. Look at how email, social networking and digital publishing are actually building a generation more closely in touch through words than some commentators might have us believe. Transparency, choice and control are the three big factors to juggle with and to seek to balance in this digital, data-filled world. Digital has revolutionized all three, and yes, of course, the change dynamic is tricky. In fact, it's tricky as hell. Surely, no one can be expected to run a business profitably for very long if the products they're attempting to sell are available simultaneously, or sometimes even earlier, and for free. As computers morph into TVs and vice versa, there's a superabundance of media channels to reach consumers, and indeed for consumers to reach each other. The key to the digital era lies in forging new models, creating and sustaining new relationships with audiences, trying new ways to deliver value based on insights from data analysis rather than clinging longingly to rather worn-out 20th century models.